Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Jay and Lucas. What's up, gentlemen?
How's it going?
Yeah, doing good. So this is gonna be fun. I'm liking the new rotations that we've been going through. It's been interesting getting different point of views. So Lucas is in rotation this week, one of our fabled writers from the Fifth Trooper blog. So it's good to have you here.
Thanks for putting me in, Coach. Appreciate it.
Even though, he talks a lot of crap about being the best Empire player.
Oh boy.
So much so that maybe I'm gonna switch over to a different faction and teach him a lesson.
Well, with that, I got a quick question for you, Jay.
Yeah.
You also play Empire, correct?
Yes.
And you've also been to LVO how many times?
Twice.
And have you ever made a 3-0 and made a cut at LVO?
Yes. Sort of. I've definitely gone 3-0 and then lost one. So, but not made that. You made it. Yeah, it was different format, right? I guess 4 was.
It was a different format. I know it's not comparable.
You should have just said, "Did you ever make the cut to day 2?"
Did you ever make the cut to day 2?
I have not, Lucas. You are the superior Empire player.
Thank you. Just wanted to hear you say that.
Yeah. Well, the next LVO, maybe we'll meet on the field of battle and
duke it out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Empire fans out there. I did a Facebook poll over the weekend being basically like, I don't know what to do. What faction should I play? And Empire beat out the second place, which I think was Rebels, by like 3-1. There were like 150 votes or something like that. Here, let me.
I may or may not message people and told them to vote Empire. So.
Oh, that explains a lot.
I for sure voted Empire.
It was an inside job.
Yeah, Empire, 155 votes. Rebels was 68, Republic 65, and Droids 37. RIP.
I love it.
So Droids beat Republic?
No, Republic was 65.
Oh, 65. Okay. I was going to say, I feel like everyone's complaining about Droids being everywhere. I'd be shocked if we wanted you to play that.
Yeah, nobody. That was the lowest one by a lot. So
no, I think
that makes sense
for most people. I would guess. Well, I think there's 2 things going on. I think one, Empire just has outside second to maybe Rebels, but I don't know. They're kind of neck and neck. Empire has the coolest stuff, I think. Not necessarily. I'm not saying in game, right? How it functions. I'm just saying cool wise. You got Vader. You got got Palpatine. You got ATSTs. You've got There's a lot of neat. There's a lot of neat stuff in the Empire, and so I think a lot of people, and I think and Lucas, can attest to this too, because I think we're in the same boat where every week I have a different Empire list because I'm just like, oh man, like. But this could work too, and I think everyone wants something to work and to see Empire go the distance at some place, because I think we can. I think it's just what's the list, makeup that gets us there.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, just recently, this week will be coming out. I've been doing an article at Iden, and there's tons of fun stuff Iden can still do. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff Empire can play. I do think I've kind of identified like the top 2 or 3 things I think are really good. For example, at LVO.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I want to stop you because we are going to talk about Empire lists almost certainly in one of our main topics today. And I don't want to dive too far before we get to that. So today we are going to talk about Sniper Tactics 101.
Yep.
I'm sure we've done a sniper episode at some point in our previous 200 episodes or whatever number we're up to now. But it's been a while, and there's new sniper rules specifically for the Civil War strike teams. So we'll hit that, and then we're going to talk about how to counter droids, because apparently they're everywhere now. I was like the only droid player at my local, 2 years ago, and there was a tournament this weekend, I guess, where like 75% of the players were droids. So And then of course there
My
was
local
LVO.
shop, we had that last month. We had
So-
10 people play, and I think 7 of them were droids.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about countering droids, and we're going to talk about snipers 101. So hold that, put that thought in the parking lot.
We just got so excited.
You
You said something about Empire. We
Yeah,
just
I
went
know.
off. Like I
Yeah.
can't.
I would very much want to talk about Empire today. So,
Heck yeah.
but you got any housekeeping for us first, Jay?
Yeah, of course. As always, we have Stormtide, which is our monthly narrative box. We are getting onto box 7 this month, which is actually the start of what we're calling season 2. And what makes it so exciting is that you're actually going to be, as a new player, you can jump in with the season 2 monthly box and you can start now. But it doesn't take away for those of you that have been playing for the last 6 months. So we've had lots of people playing for the last 6 months and have been, playing the narrative mission and driving it. And box 7, 2 really big things that are happening that I'm really excited about is we've had commanders with skill trees where you could customize your commander and figure out what kind of a commander they want to be. Well, I'm adding operatives to that now too. So you're going to have 3 different operative skill trees that you can follow and make your own operative, as well as the commanders. You'll be able to continue their skill trees. And also we're doing 4 minis in this box to fill out, those operatives and commanders. And for those of you who have played, you know that like our first 2 commanders seemed very faction orientated to 2 specific factions. Some of them were very authoritative. And the other ones were very insurgent like. And so you guys could take whatever you want from that. And so, really what I wanted to do with this next one is not only for the operatives, but for all to fill out all 4 factions and to fill out, what you're going to be able to do with those skill trees. So if you were someone who's been playing for 6 months and you have some space monk that can tap into the power with laser swords, there's going to be a mini for that now. If you're a droid player who has kind of a gunslinging droid commander, there's a mini for that now. And so there's a couple other minis, so I'm really excited about that. And also we saw it a little bit at box 6 at the end of box 6, but really in box 7, we've been for those of you who don't know, after every Stormtide mission, there's a thing that they scan, a QR tag that they scan. You fill out a form telling us what happened in your battle. Well, everyone's been asking, what does that mean? Why have I been doing that? Well, now we're going to find out. So in box 7, on this planet that we've taken you to, there's actually going to be these different zones of the planet that you travel to. And if your ship has won the most in those zones over all the games that have been recorded, you're going to get special effects, I'm going to call them, in those zones that you're playing in. And so that's going to change because this is going to be a living game. So we're going to have a space on the website where you can check in when you start your game to see who's controlling that zone at that moment. And then that's who's going to get the benefit. So you could go back, replay the games and try to build up, try to win your ship to win over those zones again. If you want, you can encourage other players to record their games so that you get your bonuses in those zones. So I'm really excited about that, if you can't tell. And then other than that, for housekeeping, we've got our order token designs are in stock. So you could get order tokens if you've missed out on that. And then the last thing is, if you're going to Adepticon, we will be there. We're going to have a full booth. We're sponsoring some of the events. I'm really excited about it. And you could come say hi. I'm going to be there. Kyle, I believe, is going to be there. And Lucas may or may not be there. I don't know yet, but no, Lucas won't be there. So just me and Kyle. No, and a bunch of the other people from the 5th Trooper will be there. So you can stop by the booth, say hi. You can come play test. You can come play test Stormtide if you want. You can come see the miniatures. Like, it's going to be great. So we're really excited about that. So if you haven't gotten your tickets to Adepticon yet, you should come check us out. And also, Kyle, I know you wanted us to mention this. there is a terrain contest for Adepticon. So if you are coming to Adepticon, all Marvel Crisis Protocol and Legion are both having terrain contests. You bring your terrain, you set it up, let the players play on it basically, and then there's going to be, I don't know what the awards are or placings are, but you can check out the Star Wars Legion Adepticon page on Facebook, and that'll give you all the information. So check that out if you love building terrain. It's just, there's all these great ways. And this is what I love so much about this game. And all I get, a lot of the miniature games are like this, is like all the great ways you can express yourself outside of just being like a hyper sweaty competitive player. You can build amazing terrain. You can paint amazing models. You could do all this other cool stuff and play, and it's just going to be amazing. And Adepticon's going to have skirmish games. They're going to have a narrative. They've got a bunch of stuff going on, which is really cool. And so I recommend going. It's going to be a blast. It's in Chicago. It's usually easy to get in and out and pretty cheap. And I say that as someone who comes from somewhere that it's expensive as hell to fly anywhere. So it's easy to get to Chicago. If I can get there relatively easy, you should be able to. So please come to Adepticon. Come say hi. I believe there's still seats in some of the events, so sign up. It's at the end of March. Bring your terrain, bring your models, enter the contest, enter the painting contest. It's gonna be awesome. I'm excited. Sorry, Kyle, I'm all wound up.
I'm very excited about Adepticon too. It's one of those things. It still doesn't quite feel real to me, just because we've had basically, we had the 2021 that was canceled, and then here we are 2 years later.
2021.
And,
yep.
And then finally, like, it's happening again.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to believe it until I'm there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm just like so excited for Adepticon.
Me too.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get some deep dish. I'm like jonesing.
You guys
Says
are
the
giving
guy
me
from
FOMO.
I had major FOMO at LVO or watching LVO.
Same.
Yeah. Deep dish, hot dogs.
Oh yeah. Going to Wrigley and having a hot dog. Oh my God. There's nothing like it in the whole world.
I grew up in Chicago, so the food is like the thing I think that I miss the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's Chicago style hot dogs. You can get some like serviceable deep dish pizza outside Chicago, at least like C+ imitation deep dish pizza, but you really can't get a good Chicago style hot dog outside Chicago.
You can't replicate it. I've tried.
No.
It's impossible.
So I miss it. Every time I go back, I have to just gorge myself on Chicago food. So,
well, good. I look forward to that. I know that's to come.
We'll be playing in a food coma.
Yeah.
When I roll back from lunch and be like, what is this?
You'll just see me napping underneath the table in the booth, my arm hanging out.
All right. Well, so that was Adepticon. Any other housekeeping stuff?
Go to the website, read the blog. We've got a stable of writers. They've all been producing amazing articles. They've all been doing great job. And so support them, read their articles, right? Because I judge them based on the amount of views. So I'm just kidding. They've been doing an amazing job, and I'm sure you see them every week. There's a new one of our writers is posting a new blog article every week. So, go check them out. There's some great work, and you guys got all different tones and styles, which I love. And so I've been really enjoying it. So yeah, please, and go read these articles. They've been doing a great job.
Yeah, could we talk about Iden this week? I think right day after the cast comes out, typically.
It depends on how my week goes. It's one or the other, but yes.
Yeah, short take. We'll get to some of this later, but I think Iden still has some play. And I think she's been underrepresented, so excited to play with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Isn't that a funny statement? Because she wasn't for a while.
Well, she's always been amazing, but people just don't like 333. I think as a strategy. They don't like the whole alpha strike idea. But there's a version of 333 now that might have some green lizards in it that seems a lot more fun to me, because while 333 doesn't seem that exciting, following up an alpha strike with a bunch of lizards does sound fun to me.
Well, that's going to be cool to read. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, let's hit our first primary topic and talk Snipers 101.
I'm pretending that I'm putting a clip in here. I may or may not. It depends on the day. So
Okay.
I got a voiceover for you. Snipers 101.
Yeah, perfect. Sold.
It'd be funny if you clipped that part and put it back over the top. Where you said you were gonna clip something.
Just had it in there twice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So snipers are one of those things that used to be. Let's talk about a brief history of snipers. So when snipers first came out, they were sniper strike teams.
Yep.
And of course, droids and clones were not in the game yet. So it was just commandos and scouts. And they had unlimited range.
Yep.
Which was a thing. Range 5 was not a thing yet.
Nope.
At all.
Didn't exist.
Did not
That's where
exist.
core assist has 4 range rulers.
Yep. And they were like 44 points, I think, for the strike team.
And you could deploy them at 2 different elevations at that time when they
and you
first
could
came
deploy
out.
them at 2 different elevations.
Yeah.
Which leans into the first thing I think that we should talk about once we get to the strategy.
Yep.
Which is corner peeking. That's probably the most important thing to do with snipers. We'll get to that. It turns out they were pretty good. Everybody was taking 3 of them. They were cheap. They were timing neutral, which basically means that when you pull their token, whether you pull them early or you pull them late, you probably don't care. And they were long range, which meant they were relatively safe from everything except other snipers. So, and bombardments like maximum firepower and coordinated bombardment.
I was going to say there was a lot of value in both of those at that time.
Yeah. Right. But people were taking 3 of them in basically every list. Other special forces were like not even a thing, except for death troopers, because you could take them with entourage, and same with Royal Guard, because you could still take 3 snipers and then take something else. But Wookiees were nowhere to be seen. Full commandos, full scouts were nowhere to be seen. So they got a points increase, and they created the range 5 range band. Genius move. Nice job. FFG. It was a big change for them. They were still really effective, but it was no longer like, just literally shoot anything they can see. So, and they got a price increase too, I think.
Well, and I think all of that added up because, like Kyle said, back in the beginning when they came out, they were auto take. Like if you weren't taking them at a competitive event, you were losing out. Like that's someone who hates them. I hate them, but you had to take them at that time. And then as soon as those changes came in, I think that allowed the game to open up into all these different areas of what we're seeing today, was because they were, I don't like the word nerfed. They were recalculated in a way that made them make more sense to the game, so that you really do struggle looking at other units in that same slot, that special forces slot, and going, I mean, I could have snipers, but I also could have Wookiees, and so I agree with you. I think it's one of the best moves that was made to the game.
The other special forces options got better in relative terms. Wookiees got buffed. Pathfinders got numerous points decreases. Death Troopers got points decreases. So did Royal Guard. Of course, we got the new strike teams with the Clone Wars. Arcs were gross when they first came out.
Unstoppable is the word I would use.
The strikes were 52 points, and they also had critical.
And tactical.
Well, they still have tactical. But so they could basically fire on the move just as effectively, if not more effectively, than the original extremely strong sniper strike teams could fire while standing still. They've been nerfed since then. Debatable whether they're even worth taking at this point. We were having this debate in the 5th Trooper chat earlier. We'll get to that. BX snipers, sort of less splashy, but still pretty good. Now the Civil War snipers have been sort of pushed out by other options so much that they actually got buffed in the last errata/points update with low profile, which is pretty big.
Yep.
And
Scout 3 for Empire ones.
Scout 3 for Empire.
Yep.
Yep. They're
Makes
still
sense.
the same
They're
cost.
called Scout Troopers. Makes sense that they'd have a big scout
Yeah.
value.
Right. So that is a brief history of snipers for those that are new to the game. So why don't we talk about tactics?
I would love this.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kyle. You bring
Corner
up the
peeking.
first.
Tell us about corner peeking. What's corner peeking?
Corner peeking is the best thing that's ever been invented. And the reason is because even after taking shots, your unit is still viable and usable. And so basically what you're doing is, generally what you do when you deploy snipers is you deploy them, if you can, both behind line of sight blocking terrain. So your opponent can't see them, they can't get to them that first round. So you kind of have some automation on what you're going to do with them. So then what you do is round one, if it makes sense, and most times it does, you take the unit leader, which is the sniper, and you peek him around the corner peeking, leave the other unit within the cohesion bubble, which is speed 1, and keep him behind a line of sight blocking terrain. And you just put the little sniper mini out there so he can see, and you take your shots. And so what that does is you can only kill the minis you can see. So when they return fire, or if something comes in to shoot it and they end up getting wounds through, which we're going to talk about how easy that is in a second. But when they end up getting wounds through, they can't destroy the whole unit. They can only destroy the mini they can see, which is your unit leader, which he then replaces the other mini, and you pull the other mini from the table because of how unit leaders have to be the last mini to leave the table out of a unit.
Yeah, this uniquely only works with strike teams. I know for newer players, it doesn't always make sense, right? Because if a heavy gets shot, it would die. But since in a strike team, your heavy weapon is a unit leader, this works.
Yep. And it is kind of necessary for them to function at all, because if your sniper died the first time they got shot, then they would effectively have 1 wound, and that would be a pretty useless unit. So, but yeah, corner peeking is one of those things that did not take people very long to figure it out. And once they did, they were like, wow, these are actually really good units. So
yeah, and I mean, some of the ways you could do it is you can, if you're on the same elevation, you can just move them out around a building. The other thing that you could do is you could climb a building, and when you are doing your cohesion, you can be at least, I think it's under height one, right? Yeah. Height 1. So you can leave the 1 mini on the ground and then put the sniper up in the tower or on top of the building to get an elevation advantage over your opponent.
Just be careful if you don't have grappling hooks, because I've definitely lost a sniper model via a clamber check before.
Yeah,
you got to. If unless you absolutely have to get up there, you may want to spend a turn climbing. Like if based on how the layout of the table is happening, that hey, they're what your opponent has, you have a good idea of how they're going to run. You're like, they're not going to get within range 5 in turn 1. I can just climb up and it'll be, I'm not wasting anything here, but I'm getting a more advantageous position for them to see to see the table when my opponent does get to range 5. That's when you do it. Usually, I think those are real corner cases when you want to put them on different elevation levels. You generally want to leave them at the same elevation and just peek around a building.
Yeah, unless there's a ladder, then sometimes it's a little easier to do, because that's typically a clamber that you don't have to roll for. But often I'll still just peek on the ground on the same level like Jay was talking about, mainly just because mobility, because maybe later in the game, it's key positions, and at the end of the game I need to run to my key position and touch it, something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Strike teams are a really great backfield victory point winner, right? Whether it's key positions, recover the supplies, intercept the transmissions, like these are all great objectives for your strike teams.
Yeah, they're even great for center objectives as the game goes on, right? If you have multiple of them, because they typically survive till late game if you're playing them properly. And so I very often will, rush in at the end with my snipers to get those extra bodies onto something.
Oh yeah. Yep.
All right, let's talk a little bit about target priority. What do you go after first when you have snipers?
So, right, depends on the faction and what you're playing against. Typically, red saves. If something has a red save, because right, it has pierce, that's what you want to shoot for. Back in the day, I would usually say shoot the other snipers, but now that Galactic Civil War snipers have low profile, I don't think it's worth shooting them.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know what low profile does, is you will have sharpshooter, which will reduce heavy cover to light, but low profile now just blocks a hit. So now your sniper 2 dice has, like, even if you roll 2 hits, it's blocked. So you need crits. And so if you're aim shooting, right, that's about 50% ish chance of getting a crit.
It's lower. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little lower, but yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
Not
Not
a good
amazing.
target. Yeah.
So I would say typically red saves and things in the open or light cover are really like the perfect opportunity. I feel like many times is when there's like stormtroopers or clones in a piece of light cover. That's almost always, just 2 dead models if you have an aimed shot. You also sometimes want to shoot vehicles. I play with snipers and I'm very like on armor, especially red save armor. It's not uncommon that I will aim shoot at armor against separatists in particular. If they're running an AAT list and they just have B1s, even though you could pick off a B1, that's not a very high value target. So it's often more worth it just to aim shoot at the tank and you go for that almost 50% chance of putting a wound there.
If you're talking about something like the Saber that has weak point sides, then hopefully you can get your snipers around the sides, and then they also have impact 1. And the Civil War snipers, which have both high velocity and pierce, basically completely circumvent the normal defenses of the Saber, which is the save and dodge tokens. So
yeah,
I would agree with all of that. I think, I think priority targeting also depends, like you guys were saying, it's also dependent, like we're giving you a generalized view of it, but it's also dependent on what your opponent's doing. Like if he's not moving his AAT up, for you to get within that distance and you don't feel like you can safely move your snipers into a position where then just shoot whatever is available. Like just start shooting stuff, right? Because even with droids with 8 minis, it's still you generally can get 2.
And you got to start somewhere.
And you guys, exactly. You right. It's just how do you eat an elephant? That's
right. One bite at a time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shoot what you can shoot without exposing your snipers. Is kind of the first thing that I always think about.
Play conservatively.
Yeah, cover is the second primary consideration, I would say. With only 2 dice, the difference between canceling a hit and not having any hits canceled is huge.
Yeah.
They have sharpshooter 1, so if you can shoot something in light cover or no cover, I usually strongly prefer that to something in heavy cover.
Yep.
I would say the exception is if they have like a lone unit leader that you can eliminate and you just need to do 1 wound anyway. Picking off like single man activations is an excellent use of snipers, and you should always try and do that when possible. So
yeah, and I would say right, and as that shifts, when you're really in the mix of things, I generally use them as kind of my cleanup crew. So, if my major pieces like my ATSTs or, a force user are like already in the mix and just eliminating stuff, you can then you can then move on to other units if you get a unit down to like 1 or 2, because you've got snipers to kind of clean up the field after them. So they're not, what it does is it's opening up the rest of your army to pick a higher value target that maybe your snipers can't get to, so that they can move on and do more damage during the game.
Yeah, another really great target for snipers is force users, since you can catch them dodgeless. All right, one of the things that really helps force users in most cases is having a dodge when you're in positions you could be shot or on the approach. Um,
Hang on,
and
we're
tough
talking
part-
about high velocity snipers.
Yeah.
here, right.
Sorry,
Okay.
I played Galactic Civil War mainly,
Yeah.
so
You
Empire
have to
snipers.
differentiate.
Yeah.
That is true. So, right, the new snipers only have immune deflect, so you can't be deflected, but you don't get around those dodges, whereas GCW ones do.
Yep.
In both cases, they're both great for shooting Force users, but especially GCW since they have high velocity.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
and
you're forcing that 50% save, which is pretty big.
Yep. And BX strikes are pretty good against that if they don't have a dodge, because often you're in a situation where you don't have an aim on them anyway, so you're not going to get the value out of lethal, but they're pierce immune. So, you're just forcing 1 to 2 saves with those red dice. And then if you're going to just be forcing saves without piercing, you might as well do it on a high value target like a Force user. So,
yeah.
I also want to talk real quick while we're talking about target party about scoping.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you guys know what I mean when I talk about scoping?
Yeah.
So there are some nuances to the casualty removal rules. I would encourage you, if you haven't read the article on cohesion that's up on our site, it's all about cohesion fundamentals. Just go on the blog and search cohesion, you'll find it. But one of the things that's most important with cohesion is to make sure that your heavy weapons are kind of buried in the middle of your unit and not on one of the edges. Just make sure they're not like in a line with the unit leader and nobody else, because that's another way to get scoped. But basically, you can only remove the models that you can see, right? Yep. So if your opponent has a heavy weapon on, one edge of their unit or another, then potentially you could set up a shot so that you just scope that heavy, and then they have to pick up the heavy while the rest of their unit is still fine. This is especially applicable with snipers, because the longer the range you have, the more intervening terrain pieces you have to set up shots like that. So with snipers, always be aware of if your opponent has heavy models that are like on the edge of their units or like in the middle of their unit, just stacked with a unit leader and nothing else, because sometimes you can get them like between 2 terrain pieces that way too. So
yeah, that's one of those things. It's funny because that can even happen, with sometimes just regular units. So that's a good practice to just, that's ingrained into some of us who have been playing this long enough. Like whenever, if I need to take a shot with my, a long range shot with my heavy weapon, I'm never leaving him hanging out. I always put at least 2 models out there with them, because I'm just like, no. Like, just in case, and that's just something built into me from the sniper days. That's actually, I think, applicable across, even if your opponent doesn't have snipers, just to be safe.
Yeah, when you get caught with that once, you're never going to forget. I had one game where I deployed all my stormtroopers in the exact same way, so just as being absent-minded. And the way I put it was the unit leader and heavy on one side and then the other 3 on the other. And so the way it ended up was there's this piece of terrain, and as he went into the open, the first 2 things he saw was a unit leader and the heavies. And my opponent terrain scoped off 3 of my heavies with all of his snipers right off the bat. And let's just say from that moment on, I am very intentional with my placement, because that felt awful. It was just, 4 white dice stormtroopers around after that.
Talking about really learning your lesson. Oh my gosh, he really punished you for that one.
Yeah, school of hard knocks, man.
And it's one of those things that it's kind of a consequence of the casualty removal rules, that like 95% of the time, the reason they work that way is with good reason, for sure. So it is what it is. You just learn from your mistakes the first time it happens to you. But if you're the one running snipers, make sure you're looking out for those shots, because those can make a difference for sure. Let's talk real quick, because I want to go back to something you said initially with your deployment, Jay, about kind of like sniper alphas, alpha strikes. Sometimes there are situations where, because of the scout moves, you can actually set up shots on the first turn. And you can either do something like play a 1 pip to like take a shot and then move back behind cover, if you can set up a good shot. Or, sometimes your opponent doesn't have any long range units. There, especially now these days, there are a lot of lists that are just kind of shorter range. Or the long range units that they have are not threats to your snipers, because you can, if you've got the Civil War snipers, you can corner peek with low profile. So if they've only got like a couple dice and no criticals, then they're not going to be a threat anyway. So you can basically scout to set up your shot during deployment, and then do an aimed shot or do a shoot move on the first turn.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that with the Empire getting Scout 3 now, right? Like that's a much more much more clear with Empire now than it was before with only Scout 1, right? That was never something I really did with the Empire back then, because like this is not a great idea. But now with Scout 3, you can get yourself into some really neat spots that you couldn't before, which is great.
And with snipers, this was something very common when we first started the game. We talked briefly before, but like Leia's bombardment, and same with Veers.
Yeah.
Not leaving them out where you can be shot, and that kind of went away for a while. But now we have super tactical droids, a sharpshooter 2, and 4 dice. And so the one thing with snipers is if you do make it where 2 can be seen, they can very easily get shot off the board by a super tactical droid. And as we're going to talk about separatists are everywhere. And so that's something you want to keep in mind, because it felt like that strategy kind of went away as Veers and Leia became less popular, but now super tactical droids are everywhere. If you leave 2 snipers where they can be seen, they're going to get one shot by a tac droid quite easily.
Yep. And losing an activation like that on the first turn is like, it's hard to recover from that.
Yeah. You got to look at the angles too, right? Because they can deploy their tac droid last and catch you out. So that's why you want to be real intentional that if you are going to deploy where you want a shot off the beginning, make sure there's no tac droid on the other side of the board. And if there is, make sure that second model is completely hidden. Something I'll sometimes do when I don't have good cover is you can put one model like on each side of a diagonal. So you have like a 9-degree angle, you put one here and one here. And so if the tac droid deploys on either side of that building, that's, a 90-degree angle, he can only see one model.
Yeah, and I would say, we've been saying snipers a lot here, but I think most of this applies to the Saboteur version of the strike teams as well. Probably like 95% of what we just said applies to the Saboteurs as well. Because when you're dropping that bomb, what you can do is if you hide one around the corner and you really have to take the bomb and blow it up while your unit is in range, you just hide the other mini around the corner where it's out of line of sight of that bomb. And it won't kill your entire unit. So you'll still have that unit able to trigger the other bombs and stuff as well. So it's just a really neat trick overall with strike teams.
And with regular units too, sometimes like if you're in a situation where you're putting a unit in a dangerous position to take like a high risk, high reward shot, and you want to preserve that unit, if you don't need like the extra dice from one dude, sometimes you can just throw one dude behind a line of sight blocker and be like, all right, maybe these guys are going to get pasted on return fire, but they can't get wiped.
Yep.
I do that a lot with B1s just because, what that guy's throwing one more white dice. All right, we can probably do without that to make sure that this unit doesn't die on return fire.
And that's great. That's something I do. If I'm running stormtroopers and they have a heavy, because a lot of times with stormtroopers, a lot of times when I play stormtroopers, I find myself doing those high risk, high reward scenarios. And so I'm always like, I'm going to hide this guy back here so I can still get the objective.
All right. Let's talk real quick about the faction differences between the various strike teams. I think the biggest one is between the Civil War era specifically and the Clone Wars. It's just the lack of high velocity and native pierce on the Clone Wars era ones. They have better dice, but also less ways to bypass defenses. So,
which thematically is kind of cool.
Yeah. I'm glad they're a little bit different from each other.
Yeah. Think about it, like the rebels, like if we really were thinking about it, some of the rebels were old clone guys, right? That were like coming up through the ranks and fighting for the rebels and have been fighting war for years and years and years and years. And so of course they're going to be better snipers that know how to get around defenses. I like that.
And it means like if you're facing arcs or BX strikes, take dodges. Like take the dodge action. Even if you're like Empire or something that doesn't normally take the dodge action, do that. Because it's pretty difficult. Like if you're in heavy cover and you have a dodge, a BX strike team is not going to be able to touch you unless they roll a crit.
Yeah.
So same with an arc. It's just gonna straight up bounce. So
I think the other big difference between Civil War and Clone Wars is the Saboteurs. I think they're a lot more realistic with the. I know the Deox droids, right? For CIC, yeah, Deoxys. But like, yeah, I think that they're between both Rebels and Empire. I think still to this day have very good uses for the Saboteur teams and taking triple Sab teams versus triple Sniper teams, especially in this melee heavy meta we're in right now.
Yep.
I also think one difference a little bit is the Clone Wars snipers are a bit better skirmishers up close. Like I will often with my BX droids flank and come up to range 3, so it's 2 reds, 2 whites. And similar with the arcs, right? Their move shot is just as deadly as an aim shoot. And if they get to range 2, it's 4 dice, range 3, 3 dice. They have red saves and they also have impervious, so a little more hardy. And so I find with them, you can kind of do some more movements and flanking. Whereas with the Galactic Civil War, I often just stick them in heavy cover, especially now with low profile, and just aim shoot all game.
Yeah.
Yep.
The droids are real nasty flankers, especially like they got a unit fleeing with one model. You just scale up a building, schwack it, and push to the middle, scale back down, kill another 1-man unit at the back, or, start shooting that enemy T series that's trying to hide.
Yeah, BX is because of scale can take huge advantage of that, clamber up and leave one guy down, corner peeking style.
And it's funny because we're talking about all this and snipers, and I think BX droids have the same problem as Civil War. I think they're a really good unit in a faction that has a lot of really good units, right? And so it's the same thing with Empire and Rebels now, right? Like choice is good. There's a lot. Like people aren't taking snipers because they're not good anymore. They're just not taking them because there's other stuff that fits their list or their style better. And I think BX droids are a victim of that as well.
Yeah, I think snipers are still being played, but you hit it on the head that there's choices now. I'm a much bigger fan. Yeah, exactly. Which is totally a positive.
It's amazing.
Right, because snipers are still fully competitive, but now Wookiees are competitive, and Death Troopers, and all sorts of different stuff that you can throw in your lists now.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing outside of just because I sometimes I see these posts where people are like, oh, or is outside of the lat, I think everything is pretty playable in this game right now. And so like when people are like, well, I don't see the bus or I don't see this anymore, is it just not good anymore? I'm like, no, just there's like 1,000 other choices, so people just have moved on for a little bit, right? And so like I hope that I challenge anyone out there to find a way to make the lat usable in either faction. I don't care. There must be a way that, because this happens. Kyle knows we've been doing this for so long that like one podcast will be like, oh, that unit sucks, and then like the next event somebody will come up with some insane way to use it. Like Lupo with Saboteurs years ago, right? Like no one was using Sabs. No one even thought about it. And then Lupo was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And we were like, what? Like how, what? That's a thing. And so, it only takes one. And so for you listening in podcast land, you could be the one. You could be the one that comes up with some crazy lat list that is unstoppable. So do it.
Or I might just get the airspeeder treatment where it's awful for years and then out of nowhere it just gets buffed and now it's one of the best units in the game.
Yep. Yeah. That right. We just said that the T-47 is one of the best units in the game. And how many are you going to see those at your local event? Not many. Isn't that crazy? That's the kind of game we're playing right now.
Speaking of T-47s, let's talk real quick about how to counter snipers.
Yeah. Things that are fast and can get in the backfield.
Yep.
Any infinite range attacks, like we said, if you have a super tactical droid and there's snipers on the other end of the battlefield, try to deploy that guy last. And if you can set it up where it doesn't matter where he goes, if you can get a shot out in the open right off the bat, that's pretty huge. Right, killing an activation turn 1 is massive.
Yeah, so any of the fast repulsor vehicles, speeder bikes, the Bark, T-47, the land speeder. I'm trying to think what else. Tauntauns are pretty good at it. They can get there kind of fast.
Dewbacks.
Yep.
Yeah. This is something people don't realize. If your sniper can shoot a dewback, the dewback can shoot you. Because dewback's moves, if it spurs, is longer than range 1, and they have a range 3 gun. So you do 2 moves plus range 3. That's within range 5, and so that's another pretty cheeky one. You got to be careful.
And that range 3 gun has critical.
Yep, exactly.
So
yeah, and critical is one of the ways to get around a low profile.
And they have relentless, so they're moving and shooting.
Yep.
Yeah, so speeders, other things that are fast.
Yeah.
Critical.
Yeah.
Sharpshooter 2.
Not vehicles. I want to make this clear. Do not use an AAT or an ATST to shoot snipers. Just don't do it unless you have to and they're in the open. Because if you can't see the other guy, you're going to waste 9 to 12 dice. Like,
I mean,
that's how I view it.
I'm
saying if you can't see the other guy, if he's behind the line of sight, and you're only getting the one. So, I mean, there's got to be, unless there's no other targets.
Which happens.
Which can happen. But if you have
the first couple turns.
Yes. If you have other targets, shoot those before you shoot. Yeah. Like always.
Yeah. Critical against GCW. Oh, sorry.
No, well, I was just gonna say, because it seems like I think a lot of people, and Kyle, I know what you're thinking, but like a lot of people in their head are like, well, I'll just put 12, 9, 8, 9, 12 dice into this and it'll kill it. Well, if you can't see the other one, it doesn't. And you just wasted all those dice that you could have shot this other unit and got rid of 3 or 4 minis, right? And so it's just.
It depends on what your other targets are. It might still be worthwhile to do that.
Yes.
Because once you've killed one sniper mini in a strike team, the other mini has to be like super careful.
Yes.
And you've almost just created basically just nothing more than a backfield objective guy.
I agree. They're still super dangerous. And I think you're right. I'm sorry. If it's advantageous to the game and and it's the right decision.
It depends a lot on your game state.
Yeah, come on, Jay. Only Sith deal in absolutes.
Well,
Luke Skywalker, apparently.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no spoilers.
Anyway, yeah. All right, you guys got any other sniper thoughts?
Yeah, sorry. That was just a long time heavies players view on snipers and going. We've tried this. It doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go. No, I think we got it pretty good. I think the reason we're bringing it up is we all agree, I think, that they still have value, right? You're not seeing them right now, but you're gonna, and so you should be prepared for them when you do.
Yep.
Yeah, they're a unit that has a very unique play style also, strike teams, right? Because nothing else has that feature where corner peeking is really advantageous. They're kind of like speeders. I feel like you could do, half an episode talking about just how to maneuver speeders and proper those differently, because it's a very unique mechanic and play style. Whereas, most troopers with guns kind of more or less handle the same, right? Like try not to get shot by your opponent and then try to get into the range band with all of them at once. Don't overextend with any one unit. And like kind of all those units play the same way. Things that can walk and have guns, it's like the same rules. You just change the range band you're playing in.
Yep. All right. Speaking of things that walk and have guns, why don't we talk about countering droids?
All right.
With fire.
Is a drop for the droids. This is a drop for the droids.
Why don't we, before we get on to like specific ideas for each faction, why don't we talk about real quick what their weaknesses are as a faction, because they do have those. I know there might be some people thinking hyperbolically not so after LVO, but they actually do have quite a few. So let's talk about what those are first.
All right. You go first, Kyle. You've been playing them a lot.
Okay, yes. I have played droids a lot. Not since Lone Star Open was the last term when I played them at. But yes, I've played them a lot over that time period. there's sort of there's really three primary weaknesses of droids, in my experience. The first is that they have very limited access to ranged pierce. You're talking about characters or you're talking about BX strike teams. They don't have a core heavy that has ranged pierce like a shotgun. They don't have other special forces units that have ranged pierce like, Wookiees or something like that. Basically, it's characters and BX droids. That's it.
Yep.
And nowadays, if you're taking a BX droid, you're not taking a Magna Guard. So chances are, if you're facing droids, they're not going to have a lot of ranged pierce. And if they do, it's going to be BX strike teams who have problems pushing hits through against lots of dodges. So that's number one. The number two is positional inflexibility. People talk a lot about AI and like, oh, you just coordinate all the B1s, and then they all have face ups, and then AI doesn't do anything. And it's like, well, your B1s have to be next to each other to do that.
Right.
And simple things like, if there's a line of sight blocker that's like in the middle of an important part of the table that you need to move around, and that line of sight blocker is wider than range 1, you have to pick a side to go around, because you can't go over the middle of it, and you don't want to break up your chain. So you have to either leave a unit behind it, to keep your chain continuous, or you have to pick a side. Just simple things like that. Like flanking is a little more difficult for them. Being flexible as to like, adjusting to a different part of the battlefield on particularly the long edge to long edge deployments, battle lines, disarray, advanced positions, basically. It's a little bit harder for them to adjust. And then what did I say? 3 things. What was the third thing? Oh, the way of white saves for the most part. Obviously, Magna Guard are an exception to this. But generally speaking, like B1s die when you shoot them. Like you're gonna take that paint that you rolled on your hit roll, and you're gonna take it to the bank and pick up models. So you want to catch them out of cover. You want to just throw lots of dice at them.
Yeah, I think from my experience, and I'm saying this not only someone who's played droid players, but as a horde player myself from the Warhammer Fantasy days, right? There's 2 things that can happen to a pilot who's driving a horde army that are mistakes. And Kyle touched on one, is sometimes when they drive a horde army, they're not thinking about doing the kind of like the clone ball-esque thought, where you're like Kyle's like, hey, you got to pick the right or the left hand side, because you're not going to be able to spread. Because most people, when they have horde armies, have a tendency to spread the army out, right? Because they're like, well, I have so many, like I'm just going to create this wall. But what that does is you can punch through that easier, and creates a weakness for like a really strong, fist to punch through one of those sides, and like like a Luke or a Vader can easily punch through one of those sides. The other thing is what, again, I think they're the same as Kyle's, just in a different way, is horde army drivers tend to not be able to conceptualize the losses that they're taking until they've snowballed too far. So what I mean by that is, like, I don't know, Kyle, if this has ever happened to you, but you're like, oh, I got more B1s, like this is going to be fine. And the next thing you know, you don't have any more, right? And it's just like, uh-oh, I thought I had more bodies to throw at this problem, especially when when you're not, strike teams is a perfect example, when you're not like thinking about, oh, they just picked off 2 and 2 and 2 and 2, and the next thing you know, something comes in and takes out 2 or 3 units because they were weaker. So those are usually 2 things I see.
Yeah, and I think this is somewhat parallel to both of those, based on the size of the units. Also, the fact that B1s have a ton of models, that also has many downsides in of itself. It's really hard to hide an entire horde of B1s so they can't be shot. And so often, right, on attrition objectives, they might want to hide and turtle somewhere, but you can almost always pick B1s off the back, poking out the sides, and get those early shots and get that attrition going while denying it back. Because like they said, they don't always play with a whole bunch of snipers at range 5, because it's so competitive between Magna Guards and BX droids. And so sometimes you can just play at that range 4-ish line and punch in and out and just pick out B1s poking out and get that early attrition. Because while it seems kind of at times that there's just tons of B1s, those losses do add up. And if they're in the open, B1s just die to a stiff wind. So they are very cover dependent.
Stiff breeze, Lucas.
Stiff breeze? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Stiff breeze. Well, like an example,
I was gonna let
know
you
what I
go,
mean.
but yeah, you know what? I like that Kyle corrected you.
I'm usually the one messing up the expressions. Yeah,
But
and speaking as someone that's run B1s a lot, you need in a 7-man unit, you need 4 models in cover.
Yep.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can use cohesion to kind of hopefully get around that, but generally speaking, unless there's a table with a lot of area terrain on it, you're gonna have trouble getting all of your B1s in a position where your opponent can't take open shots at them.
Yeah.
Also, the suppression, the fact that they don't get cover from suppression, is extremely meaningful on tables that have a lot of light cover.
Yep.
In particular, because you can just keep pummeling them and they don't get any mitigation for those suppression that they're taking.
Yeah.
We just talked about snipers, right? But snipers have sharpshooter 1. Droids can sort of uniquely be just hammered repeatedly when they're in light cover, and you're just taking all your hits to the bank.
Yep.
With sharpshooter 1 units.
Yeah.
So there's one more thing that I want to mention before we get to like faction specific ideas for builds and tactics, and that's a lot of droid lists recently have been kind of relying on critical.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like the top droids list at LVO, they had a lot of those E5S sniper rifles on the B1 units because they're not taking as much aggressive tactics. Which means that there's a heavy reliance there on critical, which I think all of the 3 other factions can sort of build against. So we'll get to that too. All right, Lucas, hit us with your Empire. Why is Empire potentially a good counter to droids? And there's an LVO stat that you brought up in our chat earlier too that I think would be a good lead in here.
Empire is in a really good place against droids right now. And a stat at LVO, Separatists on day 2 was the most showed army, and over the entire tournament, Separatists had a positive win rate against every faction except for Empire. Empire had more. What was that?
It's not like it was like 70-30 or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, all these were very close, but it was something, like they had 55% wins against Republic, 55 against Rebels, but they had only 45 against Empire. So, despite it only being small, it's still around a 10% difference. I guess the point I'm making is Empire was the only faction to have a positive win rate against Separatists. And I think this kind of just has to do with the things Empire is doing well now is really good against Separatists. For example, Empire has a lot of red saves between their units. Like we said before, there's not much ranged Pierce in Separatists. It's mainly just the Force users. Second part of that is big dice pools. Stormtroopers, especially the T21s, are great against like B1s. When you get into a skirmish, Stormtrooper T21s just start blasting B1s off the table really fast. Also, dewbacks in particular just shred B1s as well. Also, B2s they shred because armor 1, that's cool, but if you're not in cover, you're just blocking 1 hit. You still just got white saves.
Yep.
And then dewbacks
B2s are terrible in melee.
Yeah, really bad. And then also Magna Guards, right? They don't have Pierce and melee, and so dewbacks can go toe to toe with Magna Guards. And all of these units I mentioned, besides B1s, dewbacks are cheaper than. And so dewbacks being a great thing in Empire right now, they just tear apart droids in all different sorts of ways.
And Empire as a faction has red saves, which we talked about access to long range Pierce being a weakness for droids. So
yeah, and I think also uniquely Empire has a lot of firepower at kind of that range 3 range band right now between T21s. Dewbacks can shoot there. When you're at that range, it's kind of the engagement range of dewbacks or melee. And so I think when you get into that scrimmage range, Empire just has so much firepower, and it has these red saves that can, handle taking a critical here and there from a, was it E5S? It can handle a critical here or there from E5S and maybe some spider droid shots. And once you close that gap, they just have much more firepower. And T21s also are great against spider droids because, right, you're just throwing crits. So it doesn't matter if the spider droid's in heavy cover and, has armor 3. You're basically just chucking crits through that. And when you have this high crit mass and it's only white saves behind it, that's a really good combo, right? You're negating the main perk that droids have, is typically they have a lot of health because they're behind cover. And so every time you shoot them, you're just taking 2 hits off the top. But when, for example, my LVO list, I had 6 T21s. And so T21s, if you don't know, throw more crits than hits, because the white dice has a crit, a surge, and a hit, and they have critical too. So on average, rolling 2 times more crits. And so all that together basically negates all the defensive abilities of all these droids and just is punching straight through it.
The Shore Trooper T21B is also great. Basically, all forms of T21 are great against most things that droids are bringing these days.
Yep.
Yeah, Empire Core in general are just really good against B1s, right? Shore Troopers, like 2 shots from a Shore Trooper can wipe an entire B1 squad often. And Stormtroopers at T21s as specialists are starting to get awfully close to doing that as well.
Empire, I think, can also take the scout snipers, the strike teams, more freely than the other factions can take strike teams. And that's particularly good against Magna Guards, who rely heavily on their saves and on retinue dodges. And the scout strikes just kind of bypass both of those. So great for chipping Magna Guard.
Yep.
A quick sale on Saber Throw and Vader and all forms of Vader. Something people don't realize is Vader with Saber Throw does the same amount of damage to Magna Guards and IRG at range 2 as in melee when you math it out. Because, right, if you say Vader hits with 6 hits in the Magna Guard, but they have immune pierce, on average, you're going to block about 3 if they have no surges, right? So you can do 3 damage. If Vader throws his lightsaber into the open, hits him for 3, it has pierce 3. Same amount of damage. And uniquely, right, you're a range band out. And so with Operative Vader especially, it's pretty brutal when you peekaboo, chuck a saber at a Magna Guard that's trying to approach and just, chunk a model and a half off basically for free.
I love Anakin fire supported saber throws into Magna Guard.
Yeah.
Because you can take those 3 red pierce 3 that you'd be taking with a Vader saber throw, and then throw an entire Z6 pool on top of it.
Biggs Magna Guards fall down like B1s.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
I pulled off a mortar fire support into a saber throw with Vader once. I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever done in my life. So I get it.
Yep. Yeah, ranged pierce against Magna Guard. Money.
Yep.
Money in the bank.
Yeah, also a comms jammer on a melee unit can be really good. I know some people will throw 1 comms jammer on like a dewback, because if you can get that dewback into the CIS lines, blocking all those orders just buries them. And for example, if they have AI attack, they will not be able to withdraw from combat because they have to attack first. And so some people will take jammers on melee because it's just good to block orders. But uniquely against droids, anything with AI attack, they can't pull Avic because they have an order, AI dodge, etc.
Yep. Jay, why are ATSTs so good against droids? Because I think that they are.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One, especially with Arsenal, you have, if you put in a Vice, right, and you have Arsenal 4, there's a solid chance you could potentially take out like at least 3 B1 units with that because of the height. So he's getting over any of the cover. Plus his dice pools are all large enough that by the time, you got to plink them down a little bit, but by the time they get up, you get close to him. Between his kick, you can kick, main gun, the twin laser and the mortar, and you can basically fire at 4 different units and you could take them out.
Well, and play pin down, and then you're throwing those face-up order tokens back and forcing him to trigger AI.
Yep.
Yeah, that one's big. That one's tough, I find sometimes though, because, and this just from my perspective, when you want to play pin down, you're usually using it on their more critical units. Like it usually ends up being like an AAT or something because they're in a position to do some real bad stuff and you need to stop them. But yes, you can use pin down for that. Sorry, I don't mean to like, that's just my experience has been not positive with interrupting those chains with that.
Yep. I mean, there are times when kicking a token back though and forcing AI can be like really devastating, particularly when it comes to objective scoring. Like hostage, for example, forcing a hostage unit to shoot on turn 2 instead of double moving if that unit's like a B1 or something like that can be really good.
Yeah.
You know, if B1 units need to double move to score an objective or something, you know, make them trigger that AI and then they can only move once. So
yeah, and I mean, and that's, you know, that's heavies and support units too, you know, so you could put them on those, you could do it with the dewbacks and get a similar result. Yeah, pin down's such a good card. I love pin down.
All right, what about Rebels and Republic?
Well, I think before we move from Empire, I got one more list.
I'm sorry.
Oh, for God's sakes!
I'm sorry. I forgot about your. I
wanted to talk about my item thing. He tabled me talking about my
item.
Good God!
Let's move it from the parking lot. Empire. You know, and,
go ahead. Yeah. So Iden also tactical strike. Said Separatists don't have saves. They really cannot handle strong alpha strikes. And so if you're able to get in with Ida and some ISF, like you can blow entire units off the table off early. And so a list right now that I really like is you take Iden, 3 ISF, one of them being Inferno, 3 dewbacks, all kitted out, and then just 3 naked core. And it's really good against multiple things. One, you got that big old alpha. And when you do the tactical strike on turn 1, I think you're pumping out like roughly 20 crits between all your things. So you can kind of hit literally whatever you want. It's pretty brutal. And gross. Then during that, right, you could say it's a intercept or something. You deploy them in the center. You do this huge alpha. And now you have all your guys hiding in the middle. Now they have to approach the middle if they want to deal with them. And your dewbacks are just approaching in the back. And so it's really gross. And I think it has play against all sorts of stuff because not many lists can handle that big of an alpha. And then you have ISF in your face. And if you shoot at the ISF, you're going to just have dewbacks on you. And then, you know, a turn and a half. If you shoot the dewbacks, now you just have the ISF hitting you. And so it's uniquely really good against like droids because like we said, they don't have saves. So pushing 20 crits, that's, you know, 2 dead B1s and then some, or whatever else you want to do. You mean spider droids, buy spider droids, you know, you can blow up 2 spider droids with that basically. And that's crippling. I mean, we look at a lot of these separatists are super popular. It's like 2 spider droids and then whatever else you want to do, whether it's 2 magnas, a bunch of B1s, or 2 spider droids and Maul or something. If you blow up those 2 spider droids on turn 1, you know, that's brutal. And now you have 3 dewbacks also coming over. So even if the ISF stuff goes south, you know, droids are going to struggle with all those dewbacks.
Yeah, especially with the spiders, right? Because generally the list that I've seen and that I've dreamt up mostly surround them. So like their focal point is those spider droids, right? So if you're erasing those, that's just a moral victory that you're winning right there. And you're already putting them down on their back foot and making question what they just did, which is always good in war.
333, I think, is an army, which for those who don't know, that's the term for Iden with 3 ISF. And then in this case, it's 3 storms and 3 dewbacks. But I think previously it was a really good army, but it struggled a little bit sometimes like against force users because stuff could dive in or Wookiees. Now that dewbacks are so cheap and you can afford to have all this, I think this list has a ton of play. But the reason I want to bring it up is it's really great in all matchups, but it's really one-sided against most droid armies.
And the reason he wanted to bring it up is because he's got an article this week about it.
Yeah, and I've also got an article.
It's really important.
You know, I got to pump up those numbers to get Jay on my side.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go. Move up on that internal blog writer leaderboard.
Yeah. We have our own ELO for the 5th Trooper employees.
CO ELO. Yeah. Yeah, that list sounds terrifying, honestly. All right, let's talk about Rebels real quick. We talked about the reliance of droids on critical. There's one thing that I think has been underplayed for a long time on Rebels, and that is Rebel troopers with a heavy unit, preferably the DLT-20, a captain, and situational awareness. And then you take You take 4 of those, and then you take 2 commanders with vigilance. And then permanently for the entire game, you have 4 rebel trooper units that always have at least 1 dodge because of nimble and vigilance, and they block crits with that dodge. So, hopefully you're able to get in some cover. That's basically 3 hits that 3 paint that you're shaving right off the top of every dice pool, and one of those can be a crit. So they also hit like a truck, by the way, a 6-man rebel trooper unit with the DLT 20A. That's what 8 dice, of which 7 are black and 1 is white, and you have critical 1.
Yeah, it's real brutal.
It's a short trooper pool but you're replacing one of the white dice with the black dice.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it is really strong,
and it's only 77 points.
Yeah, it got cheaper, right? With the recent points update.
Yep.
So I remember what it was before, but I don't remember now.
Yeah, I think it's 77 points now. So,
and I think uniquely also, that list before would sometimes struggle if you had like snipers on the other side, right? Because the snipers could just outdo that and ignore everything you're trying to do. But with snipers becoming less popular, I think that army has more play. Because at least the list I remember you doing had like Cassian and Chewie and some other things to kind of edge out in that sniper war. But I don't think you need to win the sniper war quite as much because you're not going to see it as often. So like you could potentially fit like an operative Luke in an army like that.
Well, now you can take Chewie with Protector for those. Because Protector's a thing, and it wasn't before. So
that's true.
Yeah, take Chewie for those high velocity snipers. Just have them eat those.
Yeah, I find with Rebels too. So 2 things. One is, like Lucas was saying with Empire, like the core units all have a ton of dice, like on the Rebels. So like, the vets, you've got the range 4 and it's 4 white dice, critical 2. You've got, if you wanted the Z6, right, you can be tossing 10 dice easily into a unit of B1s if you wanted. But the other thing I think Rebels benefit from too is with Horde armies, as you're moving up the field, you end up putting yourself in these tough positions because you're trying to get the Horde where it needs to be. And Rebels uniquely have a ton of units in almost every single category that are really like momentarily explosive, and explosions being one of those options. But where when your opponent's moving up with CIS with a Horde army, at some point they're going to be in a position where they're stretched, right? It's part of being in a Horde army. And so if you can get a number of units, T-47s are really good for this, right? That can be patient and then click over at the exact right time, you can do severe damage to an army like that.
T-47s in particular are great because B1s hate being flanked.
Yeah.
And T-47s are great at that. Like I did this a lot at when I played T-47s at SoCal. Like if you just get right around that barricade, take an aim, throw those 6 dice, get 5 or 6 hits. He's rolling 5 or 6 saves,
right?
On white saves with probably no surge. Like you're going to pick up 4 to 5 B1s every time a T-47 shoots them. So,
and a recommendation I would make to all repulsor vehicle users: you only have 1 compulsory move. You only have to move once. And you don't have to move in a straight line. You can literally circle until you're ready and then go do what you need to do. Like that's a huge mistake. I think a lot of people, when they first pick up any speeder, right, they just run them straight at the lines and then they die. But really, especially bikes and the T-47s, the more patient you are with them, the higher the reward's going to be when you unleash them, because your opponent will be out of position and you'll be able to flank much easier at that point.
Can we also talk about the best ion weapon in the game besides spider droids, and that is Biston?
Yep.
Yeah.
As an ATST player, I freaking hate Biston. I hate him so much.
This one's for you, Stabcast Ryan, by the way. I'm going to say it right here now in this cast. Biston is good. You can quote
Welcome
me.
to the Church of Biston.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he's 84 points. if you want to give them like duck and cover and recon intel, it's 88, which is totally reasonable for a pretty tough unit that throws an ion token at range 4 with a decent quantity of dice.
Yeah.
And droids hate ion tokens.
So. Right, and can infiltrate, so can get in the perfect position.
Yep.
Like, especially as a rebel player, if you know, generally, if I'm running 2 ATSTs or if I'm running an AAT, you know where I'm going because you'll see it coming. That's the whole point with big vehicle, right? It's like, even though you see it coming, I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to make you stop me. The Pathfinders with the standard, perfect for that, because they just infiltrate. They're like, yeah, I see the lane. It's going to be right here. And so I'm going to park right here behind this building. And when you come around, I'm going to shoot you. And then you won't move for a while. And it sucks. And I hate it. But yeah, that's definitely a way to do it.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Finally, Republic.
I don't know enough about this to tell you what, but I would assume it's some sort of mix of force user and token sharing is where.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about Republic right now because their internal balance has always been bad, and it's still bad.
It's all over the place right now.
It's basically the Yoda show. Yoda's really good. Wookiees are still really good. So you're probably trying to find a way to make some combination of that work anyway. I will say against droids specifically, just having red saves with surges on your clones, very solid, since they can't, usually pierce you at range. And if they can, you've got shared dodge tokens. So even the BX sniper strikes against like a clone ball is like, so red save's good. That's a category. That's in the plus category for Republic generally. Fire support. If you're talking about, fire supporting something like a flanking bark or an Anakin saber throw or a Wookiee range 2 shot, throw a Z6 on top of any of those and you're going to be forcing a ton of saves, which is what you need to be doing against droids. So I would kind of narrow it down to those two things, primarily red saves and fire support.
Yeah. Right. If you're able to get a flanking fire support with Anakin, especially, you can basically have your pick and one shot almost everything. Like, you can hit a spider droid, wipe it off the table, B1s, shred them in the open, Magna Guards, B2s. The bigger the dice pool, the better against separatists.
Yep.
Okay, so for each one of these factions, I know we talked about what units, right? So is there like specific play style that you would use and tactic that you would use with each faction? I know we kind of nipped at it while we were talking about each one, but
I think a common thread I've noticed through a lot of it when playing against separatists is you want to be really careful around the range 4 band. I often find in my games, when I've had success against separatists, I often try and stay behind line of sight covering terrain and then just close the 3 and start the slugfest, because you're going to, take out those white saves and be able to handle it. Because right now, especially with spider droids and B1s with E5Ss, at range 4, they're going to dominate these little plinking shots. And right, if you poke out with the sniper, you might get knocked off by a spider droid or an E5S. I think John Bushman talked about this in his final game. Early on, he went forward with the sniper and didn't realize a spider droid could flank it and took it out. And so I find the thing is really preserving yourself at long range and then closing to that mid range and then just opening fire with everything, because we talk about there's a lot of B1s, but those B1s start going down like really fast once you start unloading into them. I had a game at LVO that was sabotage and moisture evaporators, and I was blue. My opponent had the Magna Guards with rockets and a bunch of B1s with E5Ss. And I basically just sat behind cover and like forced him to approach. And then as soon as he got into range 3, my one mistake was I poked out at one point to shoot a Magna Guard with the sniper, and then he plinked it off with an E5S. And then, so that's what I kind of realized is like, honestly, at this point, you just want to sit there. And then once it's range 3, engage with everything, because once they start shooting, the B1s just start, falling right off the table.
Yeah.
So I'd say be careful of those long range plinking shots, because right? If you're each only getting a couple of hits through here and there, like droids can spare that. And when you're using smaller dice pools, you're playing to the advantage of droids, which is they can use cover to shave off hits. So you want to get to that closer range where your dice pools get bigger and you're pushing way more over cover. Because right, when you're at long range, smaller dice pools, cover has a bigger play. Cover benefits the bad save. And so I think you want to, like I said, either play range 5, but you're real careful because they have range 4 things that can blink you, or, just completely hide your stuff and then at range 3 push in. Because once I was at range 3, my opponent couldn't, plink at my snipers anymore with the E5Ss because he needed to be shooting my storms. And at that point, my snipers could just, open range, shoot the Magna Guards in the open. So I found, with snipers, it's almost sometimes a trap against droids to be shooting at long range until there's other targets that are juicier, because those plinking shots are exactly what they want to do against your snipers, right? Just put a crit here through there, here and there, while you're just taking out B1s every so often.
Yeah, I agree. And even if it's like, for those of you that are playing highly aggressive lists, like whether it's a Vader, triple dewback list, or Wookiees, you gotta have patience. And this is coming from someone that doesn't have any, like Kyle knows, he's played me. I have zero patience. But it's something that I've been working on and something I'm trying to be better at, is sometimes the aggression and running straight at your opponent is the right move, and there's just nothing they could do about it. But when, like Lucas was saying, all these droids lists right now are really dangerous at range 4. So when you're being aggressive, they've already whittled you down by the time you get to them to do what you're supposed to do. So your best bet is either wait for them if you can, or try to like sneak around in line of sight and then get into the range 3 is usually, like Lucas said, is the right range. But yeah, patience. You're going to change your game style from what you've been playing, and you're going to have to go, okay, I'm playing droids. I need to be more patient and I need to be more thoughtful with how I push forward.
Yep. Yeah, you want to threat saturate at 3. I will say the possible exception is I think there are some lists that I can outshoot them at 4, particularly like a shore trooper Empire gun line, because you have those T
with mortars and
shores, the mortars.
Yeah.
You may or may not have Bosk, so that's probably the one exception. But
I think that list could also outshoot them at 3 though.
Oh yeah,
so no it's question. Like you don't, yeah.
But at least that list, I don't think you have to wait until you get to 3 to start. Doing that.
Yeah, that whole Krennic Bosk Death Trooper shoreline. Oh man, that thing is back in style, baby.
I faced one of those over the weekend.
I'm tempted to try it again. That was the one that I got all my good showings back in the day before I was washed up.
Yeah, it's really good. I was playing against the guy over the weekend who was running that, and I was running Anakin, basically an Anakin clone gun line. I did manage to pull out the win because Anakin is awesome. But it can really put out, like, that Empire shoreline can still put out a lot of, like, there was this, coordinated fire turn, and I forgot what this is like because I haven't faced shores in a while, but he'd pass an aim to a shore unit, and then from target and like their own aim action, suddenly they've got 3 aims, and then he had like officers in there for an extra dice, and it's like, okay, roll 9 saves. It's like, okay, yeah, I remember this being a thing. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one thing, going back to what Jay was saying about playing aggressively, sometimes you can be patient. You can also make that push, but key is to stay behind line of sight blockers. A lot of times as we're making that push, right, we want to take those plinking range 4 shots. And I think the difference is many times against these droid lists, don't even go for those cheeky range 4 shots. Just, push to those range 3 line of sight blockers. And as with every gun line, make sure not to overextend with anyone. And then once you're in, just threat saturate all at once.
Yep. Threat saturation.
Droids go down real fast once you start shooting them.
They do. Yeah, and don't be afraid to shoot B1s. It kind of looks intimidating, but once you shoot them, they fold.
Yeah.
And you got to kill B1s. Like, the B1s are important,
Yeah.
So shoot them, make them die. Don't just let them dump dice into you without recourse.
Yeah. Yeah, probably that's the other thing, right? Like, make them pay for every inch that they're taking, because it seems overwhelming at first, but as you're plinking them down, that attrition it'll come sooner than you think it will.
And B1 pools get really bad when you start shaving dice off of them.
Yeah. Especially the E5S, right? That's the real popular one now. And as soon as you start whittling that unit down, right, critical gets worse every fewer dice there is in that pool.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have 4 dice heavy weapons like Empire does, you know, to backload their units with. So, all right. Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
No, I think that's a good round.
Don't be afraid of the clankers. Just put them in the recycling bin.
There you go. Take that, clankers.
Perfect.
All right. Well, I guess we should just sign off if nobody has any final thoughts.
Yeah.
Go out there, use those snipers, kill those droids, not necessarily at the same time.
Yeah.
We are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
I'm Lucas.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.